One big reason why unhealed childhood PTSD can be so devastating to your happiness is limerence. This is the name for an obsessive, infatuated kind of love that only survives when you're in a state of longing. Now, if you were to actually be with the person, the reality of life together would displace the addictive fantasy of perfect love that goes along with limerence. And for some people who were traumatized, real life feels like a come down. It's unsatisfying. It's not lofty. It's not cloudy and wonderful. It's full of chores and negotiations and squabbles and life. And if you're prone to limerence, you may not recognize a good partner when they're right in front of you. They could be a fit or they might not be a fit, but you won't know it either way. You're likely to feel irritated and take for granted a person who loves you in real life, no matter how good they are. And if you're like that, you may have had the experience where only losing someone who loved you for real could restore the feeling of being in love with them that you had before they were really with you. You may get a bit of back and forth with somebody if you keep trying, but it's likely to be drama, and ultimately, a healthy person who is taken for granted or pushed away will move on. So my letter today is from a woman I'll call Suzanne, and she writes, "Hey Anna, I fell into limerence with my ex, Aaron, when I was 18 and he was 22. For 2 years, we played cat and mouse, with him being in the partying phase of his life and not wanting anything serious. I was a mess for that time period. I felt like I was existing in a black hole of the deepest, darkest pain imaginable every time he disappeared. When he came back acting like everything was normal, I would feel elated, over the moon, happy again, and we sometimes had months of not seeing each other, though he would constantly call me drunk at 2 a.m. and text me to check in." All right, I've got my pencil. I'm going to go through and circle a couple things I want to come back to after we read this through, and I'll see if I can help you, Suzanne. So here we go. All right, I don't remember when exactly things started to change. Probably when everyone in our friend group started moving out and starting real adult life. Aaron started inviting me out with his friends, wanting to see me consistently. Then everything changed. Unfortunately for both of us, the limerence bubble popped as soon as that happened. I started to realize we didn't have as much in common as I thought, but I had wanted him for so long that I felt I needed to see it through. We spent Valentine's Day together. We went on a road trip to my sister's house in his van home to see one of our favorite bands. And then after a good 4 months or so of stability, one night he's showing me something on his phone and a sexual text from a random number pops up. At first I acted like I didn't notice it because I was trying to make sense of it. And after an hour or so, I just said, "I'm leaving. I saw the text. I'm done." He didn't own up to it or apologize that night. He denied it and instead just welled up with tears and said, "If this is what you want, goodbye." I stopped talking to him, blocked his number, ignored him. He would try to get in contact with me all the time. He started leaving long letters on my doorstep, apologizing for how he's been, what he did, saying he sabotaged himself, and he's never felt the way he did for me or anyone. My band at the time had a big show, and he was right there, front and center. He begged me to give him one last chance to apologize and explain himself to me. So I did, and he asked me to come with him across the country in his van, that he would pay for everything, and at the end of it, I could decide whether I want to be with him or not. I decided to go on the trip. It was intense, and I still had so much anger toward him. Because I was already feeling like we didn't have much in common, him cheating, I feel, even though we weren't exclusive at the time, it made it 10 times harder to have feelings for him. I told him I wanted to fly home, and he cried and begged me not to leave him, saying he's so sorry and he hates himself. We had that conversation multiple times throughout the trip before he said he loved me, and I said I loved him too, and we decided we'd stick things out. At this point, I was still deep in attachment to him, and losing him was unimaginable despite everything. I cry as I write this now because it all feels true about everything. We decided we were going to move in together, and we were planning where. At this point, we had formed a deep friendship and were 2 peas in a pod, though I still lacked a deep emotional connection. Our sexual connection, physical attraction, was also very strong. We found a 2-bedroom house in the country and then moved around a couple more times in the same area, slowly getting closer to town because I was too antsy, even though he loved the country. He sacrificed most things for me because at that point, he really was committed and dedicated to being with me, as he often said, forever. Our relationship was always volatile. We argued a lot over misunderstandings. I just remember that he never validated my side of things. He would argue them and then say, let's just stop fighting. This is stupid, but never resolve the issue or try to understand me. He had a short fuse and would get frustrated with me easily. And coming from an abusive alcoholic father, he was very sensitive to that and started to shut down quickly. I would go back and forth on staying and going. I wanted to go because things never seemed to improve. But again, losing him felt unimaginable. He was my best friend, my partner, and what felt like home. I love deeply and intensely. I'm fiercely loyal. I have a handful of very close friends who I've had for years and will hold on to as long as I can. I don't like to lose people. But I slowly unraveled us and decided I was going to move to California to pursue my dreams. I told him we should try long distance, but after a month of being there, I broke it off. He cut me out of his life completely. This was almost 3 years ago. I didn't let myself feel anything for months. I distracted myself with another limerence cycle. I distracted myself with partying and going out every night, casual sex and traveling. About 6 months later, everything hit me at once. I was a wreck. I felt that regret and longing for a couple months, and then when COVID hit, I went back to my hometown. I felt with my whole being that I had made a mistake and that I wanted him back, but I had a flight back to California a month later. I wrote him a long letter, left it on his porch, and he agreed to come by and talk to me. I was crying, and we didn't resolve much. He said that he's just ready to find someone to settle down with, which I knew. After that, I went back to California, and Aaron and I were in contact. He wanted me to come back to be with him. He said he had never got over me, and I said the same. Ultimately, I told him that I needed to see things through, and I couldn't come back. I don't remember if I left a door open for the future or not, but then I did move back. I saw him around town a few times, but he would give me the cold shoulder. He would text me on and off. But when I would answer, he'd stop responding. He called me one morning. I missed it, and he said he wanted to get breakfast. I asked for a rain check, and he never responded. After that, I stopped hearing from him. That was over a year ago. 2 days ago, I asked our only mutual friend how he's been doing. She said he moved up the coast with a girl he's been with for a year and a half. They're living in a camper on some land. My heart immediately shattered. I've been in the black hole of darkness and despair since then. I have casually dated people since we broke up, but I always thought of him. I've had many people ask me if I'm still in love with him because of how often I share memories that involve him or just reflect back on him and us, which I felt embarrassed about. And I always thought or said out loud, I'm probably going to end up back with Aaron. Now that's all dead and gone. Any chance of him being in my life at all is dead and gone now. I feel like I'm grieving the loss of someone I loved. I guess I am, and I just didn't when it really happened because I didn't believe it was the end, because I broke up with him. When I realize now is that he grieved this a long time ago and over time found the peace to move on. I never grieved. I had a delusion that he would wait for me forever and be there forever, and I could go back whenever I wanted. I never moved on. Now that he's with someone else, I see things clearly, and the pain is unbearable. When I was dating after our breakup, I never wanted to fully commit to anyone because I felt like I would be betraying him. My therapist would always tell me, you're not with him anymore. You need to stop letting that hold you back from a new relationship. But I didn't want to. I wanted to hold on to him. For whatever reason, I felt like I couldn't commit to anyone because Aaron was the end game. What would be the point in being with someone else when I want to grow old with Aaron? This should be a positive thing. I'm free, finally, and technically open to loving someone else one day, unrestrained, but it still doesn't feel that way. I feel like I have more motivation to try and get him back one day. I also feel a self-pity of, I'm never going to love again. This hurts too much. I feel betrayed, even though I know that's ridiculous, but I feel betrayed and abandoned that he moved on. I know the woo-woo stuff holds us back and feeds our delusions a lot of the time, because ever since I met him, I felt like he was my soulmate. And I've been beating myself up, wondering if I didn't try hard enough, and all the ways I could have done things differently, if I created new karma for myself, if I made an existential, transcendental error that I will have to pay for later. But mostly, I'm just sad that this is the end. I'm scared that this is the end, and I don't know how to feel better. Thank you, Anna. Okay, Suzanne, I'm on it. Let's just go through. I'm going to circle a couple things you told me. What's interesting is you didn't tell me anything about your past. And you mentioned somewhere in here that you had CPTSD symptoms, I think. I'm going to guess that something in your dynamic with your parents, there was an absence, that you learned how to make do without a tight connection with them, and this has been a struggle for you. I'm just seeing that you have maybe an avoidant attachment style, that you had to learn to make do with very little attention. That's what it reads like from the outside. So you talk about, you guys met, you were 18, he was 22, played cat and mouse. Now there you go, your whole first major relationship that felt like a soulmate relationship, even then, was a cat and mouse game. Now a little bit of that at the beginning can be really great and cause people to fall in love, but I think you two played cat and mouse the whole ding-dong time, right? So it was 2 years of cat and mouse, and he was in a partying phase of life, and since he was so young, we'll just sort of let that go. You were a mess, you were very young. You were in a black hole of despair every time he disappeared. So I'm seeing a big attachment wound there, that you are avoidant when you're with him, and that when he's gone, that attachment wound activates. And here is your limerence. Your limerence is only activated by loss, and it kicks right back in as soon as he rejects you every time. So there it is. It may be helpful for you to see this is, limerence. And limerence probably is not the real thing. But here's what's complicated about it. Yes, it does seem like you had pea in a pod time, and yes, if you weren't so avoidant, maybe it could work out. The story that you told me about him, he was a little bit dodgy at first, and those early years, I don't know, he was young, you weren't really committed to him, and so you say yourself he didn't really betray you. So that thing where you found the text on his phone, the sexual text, but you guys weren't exclusive, so that would be you kind of actually seeing what was really going on while you were in a non-exclusive relationship. And that's what non-exclusive relationships are, is people can have sex with other people. That's what they are. So you were there and you broke up with him. But I think what was hard for you to process, certainly at that still pretty young age, is that you broke up with him. You left him for simply, abiding by the terms of the relationship that I think you had more to do with than he did. That he might have been in a more exclusive relationship with you if you would have allowed it to be that. So he definitely did his time trying to win you over, trying to settle down with you. He did his time doing that. So I don't think he's a perfect saint. There's something going on there that he would keep persisting with somebody who really wasn't very emotionally available to him, who couldn't say you loved him for a very long time. You had to be begged and persuaded to hang out with him and give things another chance. So he got up on his toes for you. He did it. And so then you were so hurt, and you cry as you write it now because you feel the pain of what it felt like to keep leaving him. And so if you had been really into him, so here's another possibility, Suzanne, you're just not into him. And if you had been into him, if this is your pattern, avoidance, okay. And I think all limerence is a form of avoidance, so you have that. But maybe you don't actually love him as much as you think. Maybe he was the first sort of guy that came into your life, and you had a big attachment wound there, and you were able to attach. And attachments are powerful. Once you have a sexual relationship with somebody, whether you like them or not, there's this attachment there. And if you have an attachment wound from neglect when you were a kid, if you were abandoned and you're terrified to leave, which comes up over and over again, that you weren't really happy in the relationship, but leaving just seemed like it would put you back in a depression, that sounds like an abandonment wound. And you can have your abandonment wound activated even though you're not into somebody. So I think that may be the case with you. And when you're in abandonment, that abandonment depression, that it causes, you want anything for it to go away. You want to feel that peace again. Abandonment depression is vicious. It's coming up from this childhood place, and it's so harsh that, you'd kind of do anything to get out of it. And then we remember, this kicked off when I left the guy, and then it seems like if I could just be with him, I would be happy. But here's the thing, Suzanne, you went back over and over and over again, and each time you weren't happy. Each time it wasn't really quite enough. I think with you, it might take some time for you to discern whether you actually have an avoidant personality that you're dealing with, or whether this guy, you just weren't in love with him. You just weren't. He was great. He was your friend. He was loyal to you, but you didn't feel that way about him. Perhaps you will feel that way about somebody in the future. One thing that I think complicated things is you moved in together. You took the road trip and then moved in together, but you had just barely forced the I love you out on the road trip. And so moving in together, this is something I did a lot when I was younger, but I look back and I just realize how much moving in together is a really difficult burden to put on a relationship that is not headed to marriage. It's because now when you're trying to decide, am I into this relationship? Is this good? Is this too much time? Not enough time? Am I able to keep a separate life with this person? Now it's like your livelihood, your home, everything is all wrapped up. So you don't have a lot of maneuverability. And there's a lot of pressure to fit yourself to something that's not actually happy for you, just because it's so disruptive to your life. Well, you put that together with abandonment wounds, and it's basically it's like you've taken yourself hostage. So for anybody with CPTSD, I would just say, that living together it's the dubious luxury of people who don't have abandonment wounds. You don't have to do that. You can have a thriving relationship that grows a lot closer, that you can discern whether this is your marriage or not. You can do that without living together. And that, I think oxygen is always the metaphor for that. So you said when you moved in together, you deep friendship, peas in a pod, but you had great sex, but no emotional connection. So that is telling. And house in the country, and then he sacrificed everything. He would always change around whatever was going on so that you had what you wanted. He wanted you to be happy. I think in the end he handled himself very well. He kind of gradually grew up in this relationship, and he was willing to commit, and he stuck around for that for quite a while. So you're right. I feel your sadness about it, but just because he felt that way, it just doesn't mean that you felt that way. And sadly, so many relationships are like that. One person really brings the love, the other one is just not there for whatever reason. He had an abusive alcoholic father, that's significant. He really didn't like to fight, he didn't like conflict. And I hear you when you say that when you had arguments, instead of getting to the point of understanding, he would want to shut the argument down because it was very upsetting to him. And I understand feeling upset about arguments. I also understand feeling frustrated that you can't talk things through. That totally makes sense. If you're ever in a situation like that again, I think that's the sort of thing that couples counseling can be helpful with, about how to get to the understanding while keeping the argument in check so it doesn't just go out of control and become something that dysregulates a person who's traumatized. And then you would go back and forth about staying and going, and you wanted to go because it never improved, but losing him felt unimaginable. So that's what it sounds like. I just am not here. It just sounds like you wanted to go. It didn't feel good. It was your abandonment wound that wanted him to stay, that wanted to keep it going forever. And that you having the belief that turned out not to be true, that he would always be there for you, that he was, he'd always love you, you could always go back to him, and eventually you would. That belief helped you to feel safe enough to get on with your life the way you wanted to anyway. You wanted to go to California. You didn't want to settle down. The life that you were living with him, it wasn't calling you. It's just the fantasy that it was there for you was making you feel safe. So I see you as having just graduated to a new level where now you get to stand up for yourself and be your own safety. And that is a phase of development. And so it is sad. I totally get it. It's very sad. Beautiful love has slipped away, and he's with somebody else. And I would really say it's too late to go try to, win him over one more time. For one thing, he might be tempted to ruin a relationship that's working. For another thing, it would hurt a woman who has in good faith set up her life with him. And, I think you have your answer. I think you have your answer. You had a breakdown in California. You were partying, casual sex and all this, and then you felt the pain. And so I'm glad, this sounds like maybe possibly a constructive breakdown, that you ran away and you ran away and you ran away from everything that you're running away from. It's not just him, you know? It's everything that you've ever been through. And then the pain came and you found yourself without this best friend in your life. And you tried to get in touch with him, but it didn't really connect. It sounds like by the timing he had started seeing somebody, he meant to tell you it when it was complicated and hard to schedule. He just didn't bother. It was probably painful for him to tell you that. I'm going to guess he was reluctant to, you know, get hooked again and wreck the new thing that was happening in his life. So good for him. He found somebody who wanted to do that with him, you know. And, you know, I hope you can join me in just wishing him luck and that he finds the love he was looking for. And I hope you will too. And I'm glad you recognize you weren't really betrayed, but it feels like betrayal. It feels like betrayal because, you know, it just, love is funny like that. Love is coming from the present time. It's coming from childhood. It's coming from all these old things and wounds and hopes and dreams. And sometimes it's not rational and we just sort of like, just, he should have waited. He should have waited. And it's totally fair to feel that way. But I'm proud of you that intellectually you can see that that's not realistic. And so I believe when you say how to feel better, I don't think you need new karma. I think this is a relationship of your 20s, starting in your teens. So many of us had those. You know, they could be very wonderful and powerful, and maybe one of us screwed them up or both of us did. But when two people are mature enough and they can recognize a good thing right in front of them, and they have the inner strength and capacity to come together, then it can turn into a lifelong marriage. And I think it's a lot more helpful to look at it that way, as like a product of two people and where they are in their life. Because as human beings, we have so much love to give, and we can fall in love more than once. And holding on to an idea that there was only ever one person and it happens to be somebody you just couldn't really feel happy about when you were with them, the opportunity to love is going to come around again, probably a couple of times. And then you will be in a different place in your life and you can show up for that relationship with what you have to give then. I think people often come together when they have a matching capacity for intimacy. One person might have kind of this partying thing and one person might have avoidance, and the mutual avoidance kind of works because you know, you're like two little magnets. It's not going to get too close. You're not going to lose control of yourself in this relationship. But when you're ready to like get married and ready to like for real commit to a relationship, there's a different feeling. There's a readiness. You know, whatever fear might come up, it seems to just sort of come through and it works for life. And there isn't this big yearning to go somewhere else. It's part of respecting your own feelings. That is what your heart was telling you. That's what your heart was telling you. So trust that it's going to come again. Trust that if it were meant to be, it would have happened. If it had the ingredients, it would have happened. And you know, people who have been through trauma, this is the most tragic thing. And I will admit, sometimes we blow it. We blow it with a very wonderful person. That happens. And the trauma is to blame. And it's really sad. And you can't go back in time. And it's something to grieve. It's something that trauma took away from you. So if you really think that's what it is, then I'm going to say what you need to do is grieve it. It's really sad. Just let it be sad and cry, and don't try to fix it with casual sex. That's just going to delay it and complicate it. You know, just let yourself be sad and let yourself be out of contact with Aaron now. Just let it go. And I promise you, time will pass and you will heal and love will come up on your horizon again. If you resonate with this topic, I have a video that's about how obsessive love for people who aren't available is a form of escape from our own lives. I've got that video lined up right here, and I will see you very soon.